There comes a moment when everything shifts. You've carried the weight of trying to make someone stay, pouring your energy, your attention, and your heart into someone who never quite meets you there. And then, one day, something inside you simply snaps. You stop caring. You stop chasing. You stop giving in to the endless game that once consumed your every thought. You think it will bring relief, a sense of freedom, and maybe even closure. But what happens next is something most people never see coming. The person you once thought you could reach, the one who seemed emotionally elusive, suddenly reacts in ways that are almost frighteningly precise. They know you've pulled away. They sense the shift in energy, the subtle change in your tone, the way you no longer reply with the same urgency. And in that moment, the avoidant begins their final act, their last dirty trick, designed to pull you back in, to make you question yourself, to remind you that even when you stop caring, you are still within their reach. It's subtle, insidious, and psychologically intoxicating. And the truth is, if you've ever been caught in this web before, you know just how powerful it can feel. You think you're free, but the moment you let your guard down, the pull is almost magnetic, as if they have been waiting for this very moment all along. The reason they play these games is simple, yet deeply rooted. Avoidants are not cruel because they want to be. They are wired to protect themselves from vulnerability. Deep down, intimacy feels dangerous. It feels like losing control, and yet they crave connection. They want closeness, but only on their terms, only in ways that feel safe to them. When someone cares too much, when someone tries too hard, it triggers fear. Fear that they will be trapped, smothered, or exposed in ways they cannot handle. So they retreat, they distance, they vanish just enough to make you chase. And over time, a pattern emerges. The push and pull, the give and take, that feels less like a relationship and more like a game where the rules are constantly changing, written only in their mind. It's not just manipulation. It's instinct, and when they realize you've finally stopped giving them the emotional fuel they rely on, when they sense that their game is no longer working, that's when the final most calculated move begins. The turning point, the moment when you stop caring, is electric. It's more than just a decision, it's an internal shift, a realignment of priorities. You no longer wake up thinking about how to reach them, no longer spend hours analyzing every word, every pause, every look. You begin to focus on your life, your peace, your boundaries. And as much as it feels liberating, it also awakens something in the avoidant. They are attuned to these subtle signals. Maybe it's the way your replies are shorter, the way your energy feels distant, the way your time is no longer centered around them. They feel the vacuum you've created, and in that vacuum, they see an opportunity, not an opportunity to connect genuinely, but an opportunity to regain control, to see if they can still make you care again, to test the limits of your detachment. It is at this exact moment, the instant they sense you've stepped back, that the first stirrings of their final dirty trick begin to take shape. You might notice it first in the smallest ways, the invisible reactions that catch you off guard, a glance across the room that lingers a fraction too long, a text that arrives at the precise moment you've decided to let go, an innocent question that somehow feels loaded with unspoken meaning. These are not coincidences. Avoidants are masters of reading energy, of detecting the slightest shifts in attention and emotion. They don't need words to understand that something has changed. And when they know, they act. Not overtly, not obviously, but with precision, a quiet, almost invisible maneuver that is designed to destabilize the sense of calm you've been building. It's subtle, but it works. You might feel a flicker of doubt, a spike of curiosity, a strange pull that makes you want to check in just one more time, even though you swore you wouldn't. This is the first ripple of their final act, and it's almost hypnotic in its effect. Then comes the first tease. A test wrapped in a moment of charm? Perhaps it's a message that seems casual, but carries just enough familiarity to catch your attention. Maybe it's a memory dredged up, shared at the perfect emotional pitch, as if to say, remember when things were better? It's designed to make you feel the old connection, the nostalgia, the dopamine surge that comes from remembering someone who once mattered deeply. This initial probe is not accidental. It is a calculated move to see if the emotional tether still exists, and often it works better than they could have hoped. You might find yourself hesitating, your emotions flickering in ways that feel uncomfortable yet irresistible. You feel caught between the freedom you've built and the pull of something old, something unresolved, something dangerously familiar. And while you may try to dismiss it as coincidence, the truth is, this is the first stroke of the final trick, the initial lure that sets the stage for what comes next. By now, the dance has begun. You have stopped caring, and yet the avoidant has noticed. They've sensed the shift, tested the waters, and now they are preparing their next move. It is a psychological choreography, precise and practiced, and it is built on your reactions. Every glance you give, every pause in communication, every flicker of interest or indifference becomes data for them to read and exploit. And the most dangerous part is that this act is almost invisible to the untrained eye. It doesn't feel like manipulation at first. It feels like a coincidence, like a sudden reappearance of something familiar. You might even convince yourself that nothing is happening, that your heart is free. But the truth is, each small gesture, each seemingly innocent interaction, is designed to pull at the very threads you thought you had severed. The final trick is not loud or dramatic at first. It creeps in, a whisper in the background of your mind, making you question your own detachment. And then it begins, the first stage of gaslighting in disguise. You might not even realize it at first because it's subtle, almost invisible. They make statements, ask questions, or comment on situations in ways that make you pause and second guess yourself. I thought you still cared, they might say, casually, almost as if it's true. Or maybe they hint at misunderstandings that never happened, leaving you scrambling to remember if you've said something wrong. You start replaying old conversations in your head, trying to find where you went wrong, even though nothing has changed. This is the brilliance of the trick. It doesn't feel manipulative at first. It feels like a conversation, like a moment of connection, like maybe you misunderstand, yet the goal is clear: to make you question your detachment, to pull you emotionally closer without you even realizing it. The more they do this, the more you start to doubt your own emotional boundaries, the more your mind becomes a playground for their calculated subtlety. Then comes the charm offensive. Suddenly, the messages are warmer, the tone softer, the attention more personal. They bring up memories, inside jokes, moments that once made your heart leap, as if nothing ever changed. The danger is that it feels genuine. You remember the way it used to be, the warmth, the thrill, the connection. Your heart might even flutter at the memory, at the feeling of being seen and desired. And in that moment, it's easy to forget the countless times you were left hanging, ignored, or distanced. That charm is not random. It's tactical. It's designed to hit all the emotional triggers you have, to make you feel nostalgic, to make you want to respond, to make you want to care again. It's intoxicating because it works on the same chemistry that once made you fall for them in the first place. And it's devastating because it preys on your very instincts to connect, to nurture, to respond. After that comes the slow triggering of old patterns. The avoidant knows exactly how you respond to certain phrases, tones, and gestures. They drop subtle hints or recreate situations from the past, deliberately tugging at the habits you've tried to unlearn. Perhaps it's a familiar topic, a line they used once to get under your skin, or a scenario that reminds you of times you were vulnerable with them. Your mind flickers to the past. Your emotions rise and fall with memories you thought you'd left behind. And even though you know logically that engaging will only pull you back into the same exhausting cycle, a part of you still responds. That part of you The part that was deeply attached, that cared when they were indifferent, wants to reach out, to connect, to see if the warmth you once felt is still there. And that is exactly what they rely on. I count on your emotional patterns, your history with them, to create openings where they can insert their final manipulative moves. The guilt plays another layer, subtle yet devastating. Suddenly, you feel bad, almost without knowing why. They might hint at their sacrifices, remind you of the attention they once gave, or evoke memories of times you supported them. It's never overt, never accusatory. It's a gentle prod, a whisper in the back of your mind that makes you wonder if you're being too cold, too detached, too indifferent. You might start thinking, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I'm being unfair. And as you entertain these thoughts, the emotional hold they have begins to reassert itself. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools in their arsenal because it doesn't feel like manipulation at first. It feels like conscience, like morality, like you're failing them. And the harder you try to maintain your detachment, the more your mind fights against your rational boundaries. You are once again drawn into a web you thought you had escaped. And then comes the subtle threat, the quiet tension that keeps you on edge. They don't always need to say anything directly. A comment about someone else noticing you, a vague remark about consequences, even a silence that stretches just long enough to make you worry. These are all part of the final trick. It's the psychological equivalent of walking on a tightrope, where they control the balance. You feel the pull of anxiety, the need to reach out, the fear that if you don't, you will somehow lose something or miss something. And yet, there's no direct demand, no explicit manipulation. The threat exists because your mind fills in the gaps. It's a dance of anticipation, a calculated way of creating tension that draws you closer while making you feel responsible for maintaining control. You feel compelled to act, to check in, to respond, and that is precisely the point. By this stage, you are already in the emotional loop. You've experienced the gaslighting, the charm, the nostalgia, the guilt, and the tension. Each step has been carefully calibrated to draw your attention back, to make you question your own detachment, to tug at the old emotional wiring you thought you had outgrown. You might even notice that your thoughts begin to revolve around them again, that you replay moments, that you analyze the smallest gestures for meaning. And while you know logically that detachment is your safeguard, emotionally, you are being tested, measured, and pulled. This is the power of the avoidance final dirty trick. It's invisible, it's subtle, and it exploits everything you thought you had control over. It's the final stage where your emotional boundaries are tested, and it's designed to test whether your detachment will hold or if you will be drawn back into the same exhausting cycle of care, chase, and doubt. Then comes the faking of vulnerability, the moment where the avoidant shifts the script yet again. Suddenly, they are softer, quieter, almost fragile. Their words carry a weight that feels genuine, like a confession you were never meant to hear. They might hint at pain, struggle, or regret, showing cracks in the walls they've built so meticulously over time. It feels intimate, almost sacred, and your defenses, which had been hard-won over months or even years, begin to quiver. You feel seen, as if for the first time and forever, and the pull is almost irresistible. You start to wonder if this is the real person underneath all the distance, the coldness, and the games. Your heart opens, even just slightly, because vulnerability calls to vulnerability. But here's the cruel brilliance of it. This act is not meant to truly connect. It is meant to manipulate. It is designed to make you think you are breaking through, that your detachment is being rewarded with honesty, while in reality, it is another layer of the final trick. Every soft word, every carefully timed pause, every fleeting look of openness is calibrated to make you emotionally unsteady, to make you lean in, to make you question why you ever stopped caring in the first place. Soon after, a sudden crisis or drama appears, seemingly out of nowhere. Perhaps it's a minor problem, exaggerated to feel urgent. Perhaps a conflict that pulls at your empathy, or maybe an emotional storm that demands attention. The timing is never random. It appears just when your detachment is strongest, when your mind has begun to reclaim freedom. And suddenly, the energy you thought was safe and stable is disrupted. You feel the familiar rush of concern, the tug of responsibility, the compulsion to respond. You are being drawn into chaos, not because it is real or urgent, but because they know the power it has over your emotion. The crisis is their tool to destabilize you, to create emotional openings where there were none before, to see if the emotional leash you thought you discarded is still connected to them. Even if you are wary, even if you know logically to step back, your instincts betray you. Human empathy is relentless, and they exploit it masterfully. Then comes love bombing 2.0, a surge of attention, affection, and nostalgic energy that feels almost intoxicating. It is not subtle, not as quiet as the earlier manipulations. It's a full-blown emotional display designed to reignite old wiring, to awaken feelings you thought were buried. Messages arrive with warmth. Memories are invoked with precision, and gestures that recall past intimacy appear at the perfect emotional pitch. Your heart might surge, your mind might spin, and for a moment it feels like the past is alive again, like the connection never waned. The danger is that you might respond, even in a small way, opening the door for deeper engagement. This is the masterstroke of the final trick. After weeks or months of detachment, after the emotional dust has settled, the avoidant knows exactly when to strike. They know the exact points of vulnerability, the triggers that will make you hesitate, and the emotional levers that will draw you back into their orbit. Love bombing 2.0 is seductive because it feels familiar, safe, and thrilling all at once, and it is almost impossible to resist without absolute mindfulness. Triangulation tactics often follow, a quiet, psychological move designed to test boundaries and create competition. You might hear about someone else noticing them, someone showing interest, or perhaps vague hints that others care more or are more attentive. Even if it's only implied, it sets off a subtle alarm in your mind. Your rational self may scoff, recognizing it as manipulation, but your emotional self reacts. You feel a spark of jealousy, a pang of insecurity, a compulsion to measure up or to reassert your presence. This tactic is powerful because it works, even on those who are aware of it. It exploits the natural instinct to want what feels scarce, to respond to perceived loss, and to ensure that your emotional stake is still active. The avoidant uses this strategically, knowing that even a minor reaction proves their continued influence and keeps you entangled in the game. Every reaction you have, every internal debate you face, becomes evidence that the final trick is working. And finally, the silent withdrawal, the ultimate move in this act. If their manipulations fail, if you resist the pull of charm, nostalgia, guilt, and drama, they retreat. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. They disappear emotionally, leaving space that feels heavy, confusing, and unresolved. You are left with questions, lingering feelings, and a strange ache in the chest, even though logically, you know nothing has been lost. This withdrawal is the last test. Will you chase? Will you wait? Will you feel hurt? Or will you finally hold the boundaries you have been building? The silent withdrawal is their way of reclaiming control without confrontation, leaving you to navigate the emotional fallout alone. And the insidious brilliance of it is that it forces reflection, doubt, and sometimes longing, even when you have tried your hardest to stop caring. It's a final whisper in the mind, a psychological echo of all the games, tactics, and subtle manipulations that preceded it. By this stage, the emotional confusion loop is fully in motion. You've experienced the gaslighting, the charm, the nostalgia, the guilt, the subtle threats, the vulnerability, the crisis, the love bombing, the triangulation, and the silent withdrawal. Each tactic, each maneuver, has been designed to destabilize your sense of detachment, to test your emotional limits, and to keep you in a state of heightened awareness and subtle longing. Your mind cycles through hope, doubt, anger, and curiosity. You question your clarity, you analyze every interaction, and you even entertain thoughts you swore you would never revisit. This loop is intentional, almost like a psychological trap. The final dirty trick isn't one single act. It's the combination, the layering, the precise orchestration of these moments to see if you will finally falter, if the emotional tether you thought was cut is still alive, if your detachment can survive the calculated storm. Now comes the moment of clarity, the point where you begin to recognize the final dirty trick for what it really is. It's not a single act, not one dramatic gesture, not an obvious move. It's the culmination of subtle manipulations, careful timing, and emotional triggers designed to destabilize you. You start noticing patterns, the charm that feels too perfectly timed, the nostalgia that feels rehearsed, the guilt that feels manufactured, the crises that erupt when you're strongest in detachment. It all begins to make sense. Every flicker of doubt, every pang of longing, every internal tug toward them suddenly falls into a pattern you can finally see. Recognition is a powerful tool because it removes the fog of confusion. Once you see the moves for what they are, you can stop reacting unconsciously. You can start observing. You can start reclaiming the control you thought they still had. Awareness is the first step toward freedom, and it's the moment where the final trick begins to lose its grip. Breaking free mentally is not easy, but it is essential. You have to separate your emotions from the instinctual reactions they provoke. This means reminding yourself of the reality you've known all along, the repeated distance, the patterns of withdrawal, the times your care was met with indifference. You begin to set clear boundaries, not just physical, but emotional. You allow yourself to feel the nostalgia without acting on it, to acknowledge guilt without letting it dictate your choices, to witness drama without getting swept up. It is a process of reclaiming your emotional autonomy, of fortifying your sense of self against manipulation. And as you practice this, the pull of the final dirty trick begins to weaken. You start realizing that detachment is not a punishment, but a shield. It is not a withdrawal from love, but a reclamation of your own peace. Every time you resist the bait, every time you remain calm amid chaos, you reinforce the truth that your life is yours, not theirs, and that the power to feel or disengage has always been in your hand. The aftermath is subtle but profound. Once the final trick has run its course, silence often follows. You may feel a strange emptiness, a lingering pull, or a subtle ache in your chest, but underneath that ache is clarity. The tension is gone, the manipulations have ended, and the patterns have been exposed. You may reflect on what happened, perhaps with a mix of sadness and relief, realizing just how much of your emotional energy was spent trying to match someone else's unpredictable rhythms. And in that reflection, there is growth. You recognize that the power to care or not to care is not dictated by anyone else. You understand that freedom comes not from their absence, but your ability to maintain boundaries, observe patterns, and choose where your attention and emotion go. The aftermath is quiet, but it is also fertile ground for self-discovery, resilience, and emotional independence. Empowerment and closure follow naturally when you integrate the lessons learned. You begin to internalize that your detachment was not weakness, but strength. You see that their final tricks, as insidious as they were, cannot reach the person you have become. You cultivate a sense of sovereignty over your own emotional world. You begin to respond to life on your terms, not theirs. And as you step into this empowerment, you realize that the cycle of emotional turbulence has ended. Not because they changed, not because they recognized your boundaries, but because you claimed your own power. You are free to engage, to care, to connect, or to step away, entirely guided by your own choices rather than the manipulations of another. This is the ultimate victory, reclaiming your own life, your own peace, and your own joy. And finally, there is the forward-looking perspective, the ultimate takeaway. The avoidance final dirty trick may have tested you, shaken you, and challenged the detachment you fought to build, but it cannot define your emotional landscape unless you allow it to. You have seen the patterns, understood the tactics, resisted the pull, and emerged stronger. You are no longer caught in the cycle of push and pull, charm and withdrawal, guilt and manipulation. Instead, you are fully awake, fully aware, and fully in control. You understand the psychology behind it, you recognize the triggers, and you maintain the boundaries that safeguard your peace. And with that understanding, you step into a new way of living, one where you care freely, connect consciously, and never allow anyone's manipulations to dictate your emotional state again. This is closure, not an ending defined by them, but a new beginning defined by you, your choices, and the unshakable sense of self you fought to reclaim.